Hey, I want to tell you a story. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a guy called Luke Skywalker who looked out at a sunset and thought, surely there's more to life than this. See, what characters and writers and fiction writers come up with their characters to make them real is they give them a worldview. That's not just motivating for what they're doing, but it's motivating for what they're thinking and how they're acting and how they interpret the world. Because that's what a worldview is. A worldview is a set of assumptions that forms the lens through which we see the rest of the world. It's by this worldview that we interpret information as it comes to us. And it's by this worldview that we interpret events that happen around us. And by worldview, if we know worldview, what we can do is we can understand people better. And that's the goal of worldview, is to understand yourself and to understand other people. That's essentially it. But in order to talk with you about that, I'm just going to get rid of these. In order to talk with you about that, I need to set up some ground words, some things that we all understand. We really need to start thinking more. And the race of life is on, and you're all busy, I understand. But what we really need to do is we need to spend some more time thinking so that we can have conversations with each other. And we can understand each other if we understand the concept of worldviews, right? So in order to look at worldviews, what we need to understand is that it's linked to culture, right? So if you imagine culture is like a lovely gown or a suit for a guy. They're beautiful pieces of art designed to cover our bodies, to express our individuality and our flair. That's what culture's like, right? Well, if culture is like the garment, worldview is like the mannequin on which the different garments are shaped. So one worldview can shape many cultures. And each culture can be uniquely different, but at the same time still have the same worldview. And that's what's the difference between culture and worldview. So we all learn our culture from our community, from our family, from the schools and things like that. But that culture represents a worldview. And there are different worldviews that are trying to influence our culture. First off, let's look at how can we categorize it, because it's a big concept, right? And so really what we've got is 10 categories that make it convenient, just to think about it, because part of thinking can be difficult, but if we use categories, we can think better, right? So let's look at some of the categories for worldview. I'm going to use my phone because, well, I tried to memorize them all, but I keep messing it up. So here we go. Theology. Do you know what that means? I'm sure most of you do. It's basically a question about whether God exists or not. Now, think for yourself. Do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? Maybe you don't know. They're all valid answers. But it's going to affect how you think about other things. Let me give you the categories. So theology, philosophy, which is how we interpret science, ethics, which is how we conduct ourselves in the world, our behavior. Then we've got biology, which, it's basically what is a human being? That's what the question of biology is asking. So where does human come from and what's their significance? Where did, the world in general come from? And for here, there's really only two options. One is that God made it. Two is that it spontaneously came about without God and evolved. They're the only two options. But again, it's going to affect how you think about other areas. So the next category is psychology. How do you think? Like what makes up a human being's mind? Is there a soul? Is there a spirit? I mean, we know we have a body. Is there more to human beings than just what we see? And then sociology. How do groups of people come together under a government, let's say? Or possibly group together in forms of families? And what do those groups look like? Different worldviews have different ideas. The next one is law. Different worldviews are going to think about law differently. For example, someone who believes in a God is probably going to believe in absolute morality or absolute truths, and that's going to filter into the way they make law or they see law. Whereas someone who doesn't believe in God might think really morality is about convenience and, what's best to do at the moment. And so that's going to filter into how they see law as well. Do you start to see how where you come down in these categories does affect how you view the world and how you interpret it? So the next category is politics. What's the best way to run a government or a country? Then you've got economics. How should you organize the money system in a community? And then finally, we've got history. How do you interpret history? What's the meaning of history? These are all the categories of a worldview. And how you answer each one is going to ideally be logical in that it moves through logically. Let me give you an example. Say someone says, I don't believe God exists. But then they say, but yet I believe that the whole world was created. Created by who? You don't believe in a God. Do you see how that doesn't work? And so not everybody has a consistent worldview. In fact, I would suggest that before this video, you probably didn't even know that you had a worldview, because it operates just under the level of conscious thinking. They're assumptions. Why do you need to think about assumptions? But one of the ways that we can know ourselves better is by thinking and re-examining our assumptions. Challenging someone's worldview is not pleasant. If you've ever had your worldview challenged, you'll know it can be quite traumatic. It can cause you to feel very unpleasant. And when people feel unpleasant, they usually lash out. So when you're having a conversation with someone about some core aspect of their worldview, you might find that they have a big reaction. Like, for example, if I were to talk to an atheist and challenge their ideas about how the world got here, evolution, they might have a really big reaction in that they might launch out with some sort of abuse, or they might mock me, or they might do something that's called initiating a rescuing device. So a rescuing device is what someone starts to do in order to alleviate that pressure when you're getting close to their core worldview ideas. And so when the whole goal for these videos is so that you can have some tools to go and talk to other people, but also so you can have some goals to think about life for yourself, for the benefit of your kids, for the benefit of your friends, just for the benefit of society in general. See, this is a video, right? And I'm talking to you and you're listening to me. But what I would prefer is if we could have a discussion about this, because that's what's most important. We need to learn how to talk to each other. So that's what this video is about, giving you a grounding from which we can have more talks, more discussions about worldviews and other issues. So in the future videos, I'm going to be talking to you about a specific worldview. The next video will probably be about a worldview called secular humanism. But in the meantime, since you've watched this video, I'd like you to think about some questions for yourself. 1, do you believe God exists? It's not a conversation you usually have in your average day. So find some time and have a think. What do you believe about God's existence? And it doesn't necessarily mean, that God, the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Muslim God, just whether or not you believe that there's more than just this reality. The second question is, where did you come from? And I don't mean like, who were your parents or what country you came from or what state you came from. What I mean is, where did humans in general come from? The world around you. Was it created? Do you think it was created? Or do you think it was evolved here out of nothing? Now, those two questions are probably going to correlate with each other. Then I want you to think about, what's the big problem in the world? I mean, I think we all have a sense that the world isn't perfect. We know that we're not perfect. So what's the real problem? And the fourth question is, how do you fix it? If I can get you to start thinking about these things, it's going to be easier for you to engage in this discussion that I want to have with you. And my hope is that with the tools that I hope you're going to get from these videos, is that you'll be able to have these types of discussions with other people. That's why I wanted to warn you that sometimes when people's worldviews, a core element of their worldview is challenged, they'll have a big response. If you ever receive that response, what I want you to do is pull back. Because if you keep pushing, the conversation will kind of get destroyed, and you don't want that. You want to be able to talk with people on a more lengthy basis to get to know each other, but also so that you can get to know you and they can get to know them. And that's what we need to do. We need to ask each other questions. And that was Socrates' whole thing. I mean, he said the beginning of wisdom is about knowing yourself. And the Bible said the beginning of wisdom is about knowing God. So whether you want to know about God and the bigger things, the things outside of this reality, or whether you think this reality is all that there is and you want to know more about you, understanding worldview is going to help you do that.